Hello, fitness business nerds. What's up? Welcome to another episode of the Business for Unicorns podcast. I'm very excited to be with Mark Fisher today. How are you, sir?
I am doing well now that we don't have that dumbass Ben Dupuy with us. Hate that guy.
That pesky Ben
Finally,
Dupuy.
Pete Pickard. Finally, we can have a good podcast.
It's been a while since it's actually just been the two of us, hasn't it? I don't know in terms of our production
Yes.
calendar if it feels that way to our listeners, but in terms of
Yes.
our recording schedule, it's been a minute. So
It has been a long time, yeah.
Well, before we dive into today's topic, I think this is a good time just to remind folks this podcast, I think, should be coming out in December. So if you're listening to it when it launches, our registration for Unicorn Society has probably officially closed, but you can probably still get on the wait list. So if you missed the window to enroll, just know that we do let people jump on the wait list throughout the year. And once in a while, as we have openings, there could be a spot for you. So go to businessofunicorns.com, click on Unicorn Society, and join the wait list, my friend. We'll probably reach out just to get to know you right away, but at least get on that wait list so we know you're interested.
Yeah, sometimes people do bail, so occasionally there's opportunity to pop in. We try to avoid it just because it's disruptive, frankly, for all parties. But at the very least, you'll have first dibs for the July enrollment.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, we open up enrollment twice a year. So the next one will be mid-2023. But if you're on the wait list, you'll be the first to know when there's a spot open and first dibs when we do open enrollment. So that being said, today's topic is going to be really me straight up interviewing you, Fisher, because I wanted to talk to you about why you started a YouTube channel with all the things you got going on in your life. Why a YouTube channel? And I thought it'd be useful for our listeners because as gyms, I don't hear a lot of gyms talking about leveraging YouTube as a way to reach folks and grow their audience and generate leads. And so I just want to talk a little bit about why you chose to invest in it and what you're learning so far. So maybe just talk about your initial motivation first.
Yeah, I think, first, this is hilarious because actually my next scheduled YouTube is I'm interviewing you about why you started a podcast. So
Great.
Funnily enough. I think, it's interesting. So, and I want to do my best to make this helpful for gym owners, hopefully get some out of this. I think that for me, I know that a skill that I have is talking and using my face and being creative in delivering content. The face part falls off here on the podcast, though I don't have to shower when I do podcasts. And as astute viewers of our YouTube videos of the podcast will know. But
listeners, you'll have to just trust me. Mark's very good about using his face. He's just
there's a lot of
adept face user.
Facial gesticulations going on, which I leverage to profit and fame. And I know that because that is a skill set of mine. I think potentially what I'm attempting to do, which is a possible takeaway here, is I know that I'm good at it and I just want to leverage it. Furthermore, I think like anyone that pays attention to what is going on in the world, one of the great advantages of technology is leverage. And YouTube allows me to leverage the skill that I have developed a really awesome, satisfying international speaking career in, but that requires me to physically be places. And while it is fun to go to fancy places and getting to give talks, particularly with the advent of the birth of my daughter, me getting a little bit older, me, frankly, at this point, having to go a lot of the places one can go, I wouldn't say that I don't love it still. I certainly do. I'm certainly not suggesting that the shine has worn off. But in practice, this allows me to, on a very regular basis, leverage that particular skills that I have and do so in a way that allows technology to scale it, right? And in particular, the YouTube channel, not unlike this podcast, if all goes well, and it's still an open question if it will, frankly, we're only, I think, 4 or 5 months into doing it very regularly. If all goes well, this becomes an asset that compounds in value over time. Now, admittedly, if someone goes to the first, maybe the first 10 to 15, you'll see I'm still finding my groove. And I think there's maybe some lessons in there too. And in fact, I did an entire meta video on why it's important to embrace the suck when you first get in the content game. But I think that's why I felt myself drawn to it. And I think gives some insight to what I hope to get out of it. I mean, certainly from a marketing perspective, it's going to get the word out about Business for Unicorns. But I find that I do best when I adopt marketing channels, not just because I've analyzed them and thought they could be valuable, because frankly, again, it remains to be seen how valuable YouTube will. It's something we're in candid conversation with here behind the scenes of Business for
Mm-hmm.
Unicorns. Is there's no investment to have Dave, who's amazing, who's our producer. We have some amazing VAs that have allowed me to really have my hands off in the whole process. I just create the outline, I film, I upload the videos, and then my part is done. But outside of that, it's something I genuinely feel called to create in this particular fashion. And
Mm-hmm.
as gym owners, we know that we are constantly asking you to market, which for most of you is going to look like content marketing and requires some platform and some channel. And certainly, you do need to consider, where is your avatar? Where is your dream client? Where are you going to be able to deliver them value building content? But you also need to make a little space for, what do you like to do? So for instance, if you don't love writing, if that's not something that you like, and there is a surprising number of training gym owners that were nerdy little humans at some point that like to secretly write. They were
Mm-hmm.
passionate writers and they wrote in their journals. Well, that type of individual is going to probably do pretty well with email marketing. So you should run down that lane. Now, I love writing too, and I obviously do a lot of that as well. But this is me trying to leverage. This is a thing I like. It's a thing I think I'm good at. I think it's a thing that will serve the business. So I'm both creatively interested in it, and I think if all goes well, there will be a end game for the business. Hopefully it'll maybe not build more brand awareness, because I'm certainly not going to be a YouTube creator. I don't think we'll generate a lot of new leads there. But for those of you listening to this podcast that can't get enough of Mark Fisher, if you want even more servings of my musings, you can now go to markfisheryoutube.com, hit subscribe, and find them delivered there. And you will also look at our aforementioned wildly gesticulating face.
Yeah, well, I think that's a really great takeaway for listeners, is that so often they feel this pressure as a gym owner to market, put content out there, let the world know you exist, shout it from the rooftops, educate, all those things we're supposed to be doing in marketing. And so there's so few times where people, I think, give themselves the space to be like, well, what do I like doing?
Right.
What's fun for me? Do I want to write? Do I want to talk? Do I want to be on video? Do I want to draw? Do I want to, do I want to do public speaking? Do I want, what is the version of content creation that actually is fun for you? And it might be for some of you out there that you haven't found that yet. I bet for most of you, you haven't found that sweet spot of places where you can both enjoy yourself in making content and also get an ROI. And I know that, I think we probably agree on this, Fisher. If that is the case, we experiment. Go try a lot of shit, right?
Yeah.
Go, double down on blogging for a little while, double down on tweeting for a little while, double down on videos or podcasts or speaking or whatever it is for you. Because until you find something you really enjoy, it's going to be hard to keep doing it repeatedly. And marketing is just one of those things we're never going to stop doing for as long as we have a business.
Yes.
and here's the other piece of
never
if
done
you can,
eating.
yeah, exactly.
Every day you have to eat more
You have
food.
to eat
it's so
more.
inconvenient.
And if you don't find something that you enjoy for yourself to do that gets an ROI, then it might be time to find somebody else who can find something they enjoy that brings more people into your business. So maybe let's talk a little bit about, Fisher, a little bit about how you think about and organize content. Because whenever we talk about content creation and content marketing, one of the most common pain points I hear from people is like, how do you know what to talk about? Some people, have tried and learned it doesn't work to just like, plan to record a YouTube video and show up that day and talk about what's on your mind. Doesn't often work. On the flip side of it, overly planning and charting out your whole year of content also probably doesn't work. So how have you found your sweet spot for managing the kind of content you're creating?
Yeah, so I think that the process that I have developed, and I've shared this before, but this is a good takeaway, because if you don't have a way of whatever you decide your channel is going to be, you need to find some way to have a never-ending list of possible content ideas. So at all times, I am looking for and thinking of ideas for content. Now, admittedly, the challenge some people have is they feel that they're not able to come up with enough ideas. Those ideas aren't frequent enough. It's interesting. One of the books I'm audiobooking this week is Tiago Forte's Building a Second Brain, which I think is pretty good. It's not exactly for me. I hope there's going to be more of a time management book. But one of the things that I think could be valuable for listeners, at least one piece, is his whole premise of time management, which is a student and teacher of time management I was interested in, is less about productivity hacks per se and more about how do you organize all the things coming in your brain that could spark creativity later on. And when we're thinking about creating a list of content, practically speaking, one of the things you need to do is you need to have a notebook or send yourself emails or download an app like Captio that you have on your phone so that you're constantly feeding that list. To start the party, what I recommend people do is sit down for 20, 30 minutes, make a list of every pain point, every specific, in their words, problem your prospects, avatars, and current clients have. Make a list of every commonly asked question that your prospects, avatar, and clients are asking, and voila, all of those things are pieces of content that you can create. And I'll give you one other pro tip here that is, I think, an interesting, important nuance. What I don't think works is going to your computer or your camera or your microphone and thinking of it on the spot. Admittedly, hilariously, sometimes we do this okay with this podcast. For whatever reason, the podcast feels a little bit easier. But I think when you're doing self-directed content, it's a little bit easier to get in your head because you're doing it alone. So I think if you sit down in front of your computer to write a marketing email, or you're filming a video, or you're creating a social media post that's going to go up on Instagram, I think there's something actually uniquely valuable of deciding what you're going to do at least the night before. Because what you're doing is you're reducing the friction, you're reducing the activation energy. So when you sit down, you just have to start doing. You have to allow yourself to suck, right? And that's part of this process that a lot of people get in their own way when they're creating content. Is it's never good in the beginning, right? And I mean that both on the micro. The first pass in email I write is almost not understandable, and I mean that on the macro. The videos I'm doing now in production design, in performance, in content are so superior to the ones than I started with. One of the points they made in the book Building Second Brain that really resonated specifically to this topic was, I think it was Sebastian Junger, who's an author, wrote a book called Tribes, a very intelligent guy. And he made the point, and this is provocative, I don't know if this is strictly true, but there's no such thing as writer's block. There's only insufficient research. His perspective is anytime I can't write about something, I don't know enough about it. And honestly, when I think about content, both as a training gym owner and as a training gym business coach, I think part of why I never run out of content is I'm never not thinking about it. I'm never not engaging with clients. I'm never not reading about this. I'm never not listening to podcasts. And I pride myself on somebody for, admittedly, the extreme amount of content I consume, I create just as much, right? So certainly you don't need to go as extreme as this, but in a given week, at least in theory, I will do at least one Business for Unicorns podcast, usually a guest podcast. I will write one email for Business for Unicorns. I'll write 2 emails for Mark Fisher Fitness. I will film 3 videos for YouTube. And this is excluding when I have to do additional writing of landing pages or marketing copy, because admittedly that's a little bit different than creating content. So now, admittedly, I have structured my business at this point in my career where I have determined that is a unique ability. Therefore, I free up much of my time so I can focus a lot of my energy on that, because it's the main thing I need to do is put out content. But even if you're doing that on a smaller scale, I think start with a list of all the things you could talk about. Make sure the night before you have to create the thing that you have a list and you decide in advance what you're going to write on. And then when you are creating the thing, give yourself permission for it to not be good at first. You have to build in that buffer, right? Because if I can offer one other macro thought, and this is all sort of hilarious and so meta, right? Because the full disclosures, we don't know what's going to happen with this YouTube channel. I think the thing that's maybe a little bit different about the way that I'm approaching it, and of course, there's reasons I can that maybe a classic training gym owner might not, is I'm just going to do it for 2 years. If I just do 200 videos for 2 years, I'll know if I'm good or not, right? And of course, I'm tricking myself, right? Because the one thing I think we want you to be cognizant of, and it, on the one hand, it is very important to test out and try what works for you. But on the other hand, there is the Cal Newport concept of so good that they can't ignore you, that you might come to like a thing and come to like the process if you push through the suck. So I might offer that you might need to go all in on something for at least a couple of months, because in the beginning, you're not going to be good at it. And if you're somebody that needs to be good at the thing to like it, which by the way is most of us, you might not like the thing. So I think there's a little bit of an art there between following your star and being honest about what you're willing to or not willing to do, but also being willing to create a real structure around these things. Last night I was in my my men's group, which is all confidential. So I can't talk about it, but in my men's group, doing my men's work. And one of the things that came up, which I can share because it wasn't related to individual, I thought was a really powerful framework is perhaps instead of discipline, we might embody that as devotion. How does it feel if this work for your creation of content, which you must do, and sometimes it might feel like a burden for you, I know it does for me, what if it wasn't about disciplining yourself with rigidity? What if this was an act of devotion to your craft, to this topic that you're both enamored with intellectually, and even more importantly, these people that you love, that you want to help, that you want to communicate with, that you want to share content that helps enrich their life with this expertise that you have cultivated?
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful reframe. I think thanks for sharing that one, Fisher. I think it's a beautiful reframe because I think you're right. So many folks that we talk to feel like it's like it is a burden, like it is like a real heavy weight to carry to have to create content on a regular basis, and reframing it like a devotion to serving people, reframing a devotion to a passion for health and wellness, or whatever it is for you, dear listener. I think it's a great reframing. I think it's useful. Just circling back, I want to just summarize the takeaways I think for our listeners that you repeated, which is, have a place to write down all your ideas for content. Get started by, I think, you mentioned a bunch of things. Just get started by writing down all the common questions you get, all the questions you get from clients, all the things you can talk about. Like, get a head start there. I think it's awesome. You're going to suck for a little while. So be patient with yourselves. You might need to try things for a little while, decide whether or not you like it or whether or not you suck. That's also useful. As you were talking about that, one of the things that came out for me, I like also the tip of know the night before what content you're going to create. And one of the things that came out for me as you were saying that was, there's some relatively recent research on procrastination, I should say, and that procrastination actually has a plus side, which is procrastinators, it's been shown, actually have their subconscious lingering on the topic during the time they're procrastinating, which means when they go to do the work, they sometimes do it faster and better than people who don't procrastinate, which is interesting. We can talk more about that at some point. But it's that whole idea is if you know the night before the thing you're working on, you are subconsciously going to be working on it. When you sit down to do it, it's going to feel a little easier, a little more natural to talk about because you've already been working on it in your brain without you knowing it, right? And that's a little bit of a benefit of procrastination, you might call it.
Yeah, that precisely aligns with my experience. I cannot speak too much to procrastination as I have many challenges.
Yeah, that's not exactly.
One of my personal freakish quirks is I don't tend to procrastinate on things, though. I'm like anybody else. And I think that for me, if I procrastinate on something, it's usually something not remotely creative. It's very rare I have a creative task I procrastinate on. But that very much aligns with my experience that there's something subconscious that happens that with the night before, and this is part of course, my time management system, which by the way, there's still spots. Go to markfisherfitness.com/time, start the new year with me on January 7th. That in that system, one of the things that I think is so important is preparing in the morning and reducing friction. And it's never occurred to me, not only are there logistical benefits to it, but there might actually be creative subconscious benefits that I don't think I have maybe grokked till this conversation.
Yeah, for sure. I think, your sense of planning is certainly not something I categorize as procrastination, but there is some sense of planting a seed of intention or planting a seed of a problem you want to work on or a topic you want to talk about or content you want to create. And then knowing you're going to do it later.
Yes, and then letting it go.
Means that
precisely.
Letting it go, walking away, that there's something, that's been shown that happens subconsciously that's actually beneficial. And there's a point of diminishing returns with procrastination where if you actually procrastinating and it's too long, that benefit gets lost or diminished a little. But point taken, made me think of that. Maybe final question as we maybe wrap things up here, because we started talking about why you started a YouTube channel, but we actually haven't talked about YouTube a lot. So I just want to, now that you've now created many videos on YouTube, I wonder if you can just say a little bit about what you've learned in terms of best practices, in terms of like what makes a good YouTube video. I know we're still learning, but I know there's a lot of, you've studied this a lot, talked about it a lot. So what tips do you have for listeners who maybe want to get into more content specifically on YouTube?
Yeah, I guess the first thing I will say as an overarching thought is, while on the one hand, we think it's important for you to explore different mediums in a vacuum with my marketing hat on, I don't know it will make sense for most training gym owners to really use YouTube as a marketing channel for the business. I think video can make sense if you're good at video. Not everyone is. Particularly because, remember, YouTube will not work very well as a lead generation tool. Like, you won't go organic in the YouTube algorithm for the most part. Maybe you will in your local area. I'm a little on tenuous ground here. This is not my expertise. it can work as a lead nurture if you have videos that you're putting up. And if you find a captive audience of subscribers, of prospects, current members, that could be valuable. The things that seem to be best practice for YouTube are not unlike any other form of marketing, which is, I think the subject line, the heading has to create an itch. And then the first moment has to really compound that itch that they then need to scratch. I think, like any other form of content, you want clear calls to action in the video and in the description box about what to do next if they're interested in working with you further. I think the types of content we've already discussed. I think one thing too to really hammer home is you're building the content on the pain points and then you're creating the solutions. So start with the pain point. For no other reason, people are more likely to, unfortunately, search the pain point than a particular given solution, because they might, by definition, not even know what that is. I think another thing that is helpful if you go down the YouTube rabbit hole is you're looking for them to consume as much of your content as possible. So you want to keep linking back to other videos on that topic. So if they like what you're doing, they just spend a lot of time with you, because it is a truism of content marketing. At a certain point, if people consume enough of your content, they're into you, they are very likely to actually, at that point, hire you and give you money to work with you in a more substantive way. So I think the final thing I'll share that is important for YouTube generally, and again, whether this is particularly relevant to a local brick and mortar training gym, it's not entirely clear to me, but thumbnails are a big piece of it, right? And admittedly, part of what has worked really well, also, I keep saying admittedly, sorry, listener. Every time I say admittedly here, you can give me the devil eye for the video.
We can just make it a drinking game. Yeah.
Admittedly. Yeah. One thing too that I will circulate that has worked really well for me here, that depending on where you're at in your gym, I think is another potential takeaway is, as they say in Strategic Coach, don't figure out the how, find a who. The who, not how. A lot of this stuff I have been able to not have to figure out because I found someone that really understands YouTube really, really well, who happens to understand the fitness industry really well. Dave Rasco is an awesome human. Then he found an incredible editor. And then a second person worked with is amazing at thumbnails. And that allows me to just create the videos and send it off. Now, certainly there is dialogue back and forth. So as we'll surprise no, and one challenge we've had is, of course, the videos I've been turning in of late are 20-minute monstrosities that take a very long time for our amazing editor to edit down to 10 minutes. And I'm working on that too. So I don't mean to make it sound like I'm not doing any learning myself, but I would say that a huge advantage for me in this, which you might consider, is finding, if not an editor, finding coaching, finding people that really know what they're doing, and becoming a student of whatever craft, of whatever channel it is that you are going to start spending time on.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah. Let's leave it there, my friends. Thanks, Fisher. This was really useful. I think, for takeaway for YouTube, it's like, decide whether or not it's the right platform for you, always making content based on people's problems, not solutions, link back to your content, make your content circular with good calls to action for what you want people to do next. I think those are great takeaways, whether you use YouTube or not. So,
Yeah.
And if you are using YouTube, obviously thumbnails become pretty critical. And
Yes.
so that's super useful. All right. Well, this was a great conversation. Thanks for sharing. I know this was really about me interviewing you about a decision you made, but I think there's a lot of really valuable takeaways for our listeners. So thanks, Fisher. This was awesome.
If I may, let's end with, can I give one final pro tip that I realize I haven't articulated? So I don't think I've said this out loud before, and this is something that's obvious to me, but it might not be obvious to you.
Yeah.
The key to being consistent with content is you can't create it just in time. If you are creating your content the day before or 2 days before, one, the quality will suffer, and two, you will occasionally have life happen, and then there will be a disruption in whatever you're posting, emailing, calendar is, and then you will subconsciously send the message that you can't be counted on to your list. That's maybe a little harsh. I don't know if that's precisely what's happening, but I try to stay 2 months ahead for my emails and for the videos, 2 full months ahead. And that gives me a lot of margin, a lot of buffer, that if something weird happens in my life, that any audience that follows me on any platform doesn't have to worry about us going dark and there not being a reason why we went dark. I know that can be a little bit work up front, because it will require you, if you are just running in front of the ball like Indiana Jones, in order to get ahead of that boulder, it'll be a gnarly maybe week or two. But if you can get at least a few weeks and as much as 2 months ahead, I think you will find that a very, very good use of your time, and will also give you a lot more ease, which I think will allow for better creative juices when you have to produce.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Yeah, I'll +1 that. Even just my experience making this podcast, there's been times where I've been making the episode that's for the next week, and that's stressful. And we might be, in the history of this podcast, probably missed a few weeks here or there, or especially around the holidays, I know we have. But since we've been doing our better job of getting ahead of it, it just makes the content creation process so much more fun, so much more enjoyable. I get to relax. We get to make sure we don't miss any weeks. And so I just want to +1 that as a creator, that's absolutely been my experience. So yeah, great final tip. All right, listeners. Well, if you found this valuable and you like this podcast, please leave us 5 stars on all the platforms. Go on all of them, and on all of them, give us a review with 5 stars and let us know what you want us to talk about. Email us, Michael at businessforunicorns.com, Mark at businessforunicorns.com, and tell us who you want us to talk to and what you want us to talk about. We're here to serve you. Thanks for a great conversation, Fisher. I'll see you on the next one.
Bye.